Hello there, and welcome to a bunch of cults with me, Gardulla the Hutt, and Porkins.
Hello.
Red number what were you?
Number 6.
Red number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Now, every time you're going to hear one of these, what we will have done is watched a classic sci-fi that one of us has suggested, we just fancied watching again. Mm-hmm. And I suppose here we are in 2015. There is only one franchise we kind of could have started with. We've just watched... Well, tell us what we just watched.
Well, I suppose the first thing to ask is Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope a cult film?
Your definition of cult being...
Well, cults are often underground, unsuccessful films or ones that catch on later. Star Wars, for me, I call this film Star Wars. I don't call it A New Hope. It is Star Wars. For me, this is a cult film. It has to be a cult. It has a cult following. It has a following that's recognised on the census.
I suppose, actually, it must be the only film that's actually launched a chartable, recordable religion.
Yes. Can you think of another one?
I can't think of it. I was going to say something. I was going to say Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
But of course, I think that already existed.
Yes,
I'm led to believe.
Yes.
That
Well,
it
no,
already existed.
I think the film is of that particular story is probably something that exists, is more likely to have happened than the story it was based upon.
So I love.
we do have we do have the chosen one in this franchise as well. I hasten to.
Well, we certainly do. But we have just watched for the first time, because I've never seen it in this format before. Neither have you, right?
No.
This was Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, but this was the Blu-ray, tarted up version with all the extra George Lucas bells and whistles in, but it was in glorious HD.
Yes, this is probably the most up-to-date version of the film. And like you, I'd never seen it in high definition, and I was absolutely blown away by the quality. I mean, the one thing, I've said this while we were watching it, George Lucas broke so many barriers, so much new ground in making this film, but he did strictly adhere to the tenets of good, solid filmmaking, including, building those brilliant sets, lighting them, using, the perfect cameras, the perfect film stock. I'm not an expert on the technical side of it, but all of that was captured by his solid fundamentals. So when it came to getting a Blu-ray version of this film, I was just absolutely blown away by how good it looked. I was scared that some of the old 70s effects in particular might look a bit strange in HD.
But the thing with that is the old 70s effects were even in the Star Wars film, 95% of the time they were practical anyway.
Yes.
So it's if you have, something in front of you, a tangible something, doesn't matter what it is, a person or a robot or a gun, if you have that tangible thing, then it doesn't matter whether you see it in HD or SD.
Yes,
it's still there, isn't it? And so you might look a bit rough around the edges. The tool, the effects might look cheap. The Obi-Wan's cloak looked very threadbare, but then you think to yourself, it must have looked threadbare. He's been living in a cave for 30 years or 17 years or however long he was living in the cave for. So it's good that it looked threadbare.
Yes.
But actually, I was just totally amazed, like you were, at just how well everything stood up.
There was a couple of, you get those, you see it in Battlestar Galactica, where they probably only had about 4 optical effects during the whole film that they just reversed and flipped over and repeated ad nauseum. And you see it in Battlestar Galactica, where some of the spaceships in space are on like glass plates, and you can actually see the outline of the glass plate.
Yes.
I did see a little bit of that in this. It's always been there. I've seen it in previous versions. That is still there, and I'm happy about that.
Okay.
A lot of the touching up that Lucas has done, with various reversions of the original trilogy, he tries to get rid of things like that, and whether I'm sure he would rather have not had that in this version, but I'm kind of glad that it is there. I mean, the thing is, it's analog. As you say, it's a model, so there is detail there to be brought out in HD.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about a CGI effect, you're talking about textures. You're talking about 4K textures, 8K textures. There's nothing there to bring out. It's as good as it will ever look on the screen when it was first made. So I thought the older stuff looked brilliant on Blu-ray.
Well, the other side of that, isn't it, is that whilst the old stuff looked great, the George Lucas editions, which, I mean, everybody's ranted on about these before, right?
Yes.
I mean, and we have as well.
Yes.
You look at those, in the Mos Eisley scenes early on in the film,
man,
there's so much stuff been thrown at the screen. Absolutely,
it begins
valueless.
When they enter the town in the land speeder, and they have the appalling scene with.
Well, for a start,
scene.
they enter the town in the land speeder. We never saw that, right?
Well, I think in the original there was one shot that was a bit ropey. I think they actually used Vaseline on the print, to try and make that hover effect underneath
the shimmer.
Yeah, that that was a composite shot. That wasn't a model. That was an early attempt at what you might call CGI now, although there's no computers used. But that was all that one shot. It's very similar to the one shot you get from the original cut of Star Wars when the Falcon blasts off from Mos Eisley. You just get that one locked-off shot of a little Falcon disappearing into the sky, whereas in this one you get the moving camera and the Falcons are in close. This entrance to Mos Eisley when they're in Luke's speeder, it was kind of like that. There was one very modest special effects shot that was perfectly adequate.
Yeah,
and I remember it.
Well, you could suspend your belief to watch something like that. It doesn't stick out
like a load of crap CGI that they
like a load of crap CGI that's of enormous Brontosaurus-style monsters that you don't need. And even... But it got to the point where it's been parodied a dozen times, and actually really well. All of those extra shots from this version.
Yes.
You noticed that the spoof version of the Episode 7 trailer, the George Lucas re-edit?
You introduced me to that trailer. I think it is brilliant. I think it sums up everything about where Star Wars was going under the last days of George Lucas.
Huge things walking in front of shot.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? I mean,
but actually, and you look at it, the narrow-minded person in me looks at that and goes, well, there's physically not enough room for that dinosaur to have walked between the camera and, it would have walked over the speed, it would have crushed it.
Yeah. And the other strange thing is, apart from being completely distracting and taking your eye and your attention away from what's important in those scenes, because there's the floating droids, there's the Jawas, there's the Dewbacks, moving in the background. The other thing that's just ridiculous about them is, as you say, it just looks fake. It takes you out of the moment. What I was going to say is, did they put this stuff in because they wanted to turn it into toys? Was it going to be merchandise? Well, I don't think they did. It purely is there to show off, and that to me isn't Star Wars. That's what Star Wars became.
I can't imagine, having seen the original God knows how many times, like you have. I don't know how many times. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen it. But you sit and you watch it. I'm sure I remember interviews at the time when he was doing the computer re-edits of them.
Yes.
Where he was saying, I'd always wanted to put these things in. I'd always wanted to have this. I'd always wanted to have that, but I couldn't do it then.
Yeah.
And it's like, how could you? I don't get the sense from watching the original edits.
Yeah.
Of a filmmaker that was desperate to put more in it. I think there was. I get the sense that what we saw in that first cut was his film. That's what he wanted to do. He might not have been able, in terms of like budget or anything, he might not have been able to go to a couple of different planets, or have a longer space battle, or have more fighters on the rebel attack. I don't think as he was making that in 76 to be released in 77, I don't think he was thinking I could really do with a big Diplodocus walking through Mos Eisley.
I suspect two things happened. One is that film absolutely changed cinema forever and made him incredibly rich.
Yeah.
And therefore that changed him as a man, changed him as a person.
Maybe.
But the other thing is, it's well documented that him making Star Wars was an appalling experience for him, and he didn't want to direct after that. He was constantly battling the British crews, the pressure from the studio, going over budget, going over time, all of these things. I think it soured him. He kind of felt compromised, even though the end product was brilliant. So later on, he's got all this money, and he's got this kind of resentment almost.
Yeah.
I think, there's a real sort of hubris thing there, an ego thing, that I can do this now, even though, as you say, the product as it was in the 70s when we saw it as a kid, it doesn't need this crap. Anyone can tell you it does not need it. I mean, I don't have kids, so, I don't get any feedback from kids who watch it today. But I can't believe children enjoy Star Wars more because of those crap CGI shots that have been plonked in as, the film's evolved.
Well, having said all of that, though, as hugely distracting as they are, it didn't really distract away from what is at its heart a truly fantastic film.
Mm-hmm.
And the Blu-ray and the HD, I mean, it looks amazing. It absolutely looks amazing.
I think I can say it's the best looking film I've ever seen. What we've just seen now, the Blu-ray of Star Wars, amazing.
I mean, it looks $1 million. So it's interesting. You think, that there must have been extra processes. What I would really like to see is a version on Blu-ray, an HD version minus the extra crap. That's what I want to see.
I mean, what spooks me about it is we sort of tend to think there's been maybe 3-4 reversions of this film. There's the one that first came out that wasn't Episode 4. It wasn't called A New Hope. There were ones that came out after that where things were slightly tweaked. Then there was the CGI stuff that came out in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then, we've got this Blu-ray version today. And, the sounds and, the other little bits and pieces are still being meddled with. And, I've seen clips on YouTube where actually that same scene has been mucked about with, getting on for 12 times. It's not 3 or 4. It's a lot more. So we're actually at the stage now where, I also would love a Blu-ray version of Star Wars. That it was my favourite cut of the film.
Yeah.
But what cut is that? How do you know? I mean,
are they named?
No, they're not.
A
lot of them are really invidious, little changes without anyone noticing.
Right.
It almost takes. Well, it does take fans to spot it and say, "Hang on, it's changed again." It's because it was VHS release, VHS, and then early DVD, and now
Well, the last
Laserdisc as well.
Laserdisc, as we call it, but I mean the last disc. Well, the last copy of Star Wars I owned, I did have it on, tape. I had it on VHS.
Yes.
And that format was good. I enjoyed the film, but then I do have the box set of the original trilogy just on straight DVD.
Yeah.
And it was a 4-disc set, I remember. So you had all 3 of the films.
Okay.
And each of them had a few making ofs.
Yeah.
Which is unusual for Star Wars, because the one thing Star Wars isn't, I mean, it's not stingy when it comes to DVD and Blu-ray releases. You tend to get quite a decent amount of stuff on their setups.
The prequels are copious amounts.
Huge amounts of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one documentary, I suppose, one major documentary of the original Star Wars days. So that was on the 4th disc. And then a whole series of how they did, the sound design, the costume design, why Harrison Ford's shirt looked cream in some shots and a bit more sandy coloured in others.
Really? They did address that in these...
No, I'm just saying that's the kind of nonsense issue they cover in DVDs.
That was the one thing that freaked us out. Yeah, Harrison Ford, Han Solo's shirt is white, is it not? But in the film, it was yellow.
It's yellow,
and then it becomes white.
It becomes white, but then it looks like I want it looking more sandy.
Yeah,
they constantly seem to be changing around with his shirt.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Heaven knows what colour he's going to be wearing when he's in the new film.
Oh my God, yeah, probably high visibility because he'll be old and fragile. Wouldn't it be terrible if Han Solo had lost his dress sense once he's wearing those trousers that come really high up over your stomach,
braces.
Yes, indeed, flat cap and.
Oh, yes. You're confusing Harrison Ford with Compo from Last of Civil War.
Yeah, Harrison Ford gets pushed down a hill in a bath. But if you're saying which is
what
the
do you
version,
say, Foggy?
If you're saying which is the version you would like to see, polished up and for your delectation, I wonder if there's a time coming in the future where you can actually edit your own version of the film. Once technology gets a bit more evolved at home, there'll be so many different, not takes, but so many different treatments of the way the film was edited
What do you mean? You
sound
piece
recorded.
it together from just the raw scenes, kind of
Yeah,
thing?
well, I can remember this
Well,
is
if that doesn't exist, then to be honest, whoever Disney who owns it now, they ought to be rushing that into production. That's a brilliant idea.
Well, I remember when those, the ones with the CGI where you get the extra X-wings and all of that, and the Jabba scene, when they came out, it was sometime in the 90s. But
I went to see him at the cinema. I went with my dad.
Right,
which he's
okay.
never forgiven me for.
Well, before that release of the films came out, there was a previous one where it had just been remastered. This was in the days of VHS. And it was a box set of the three of them. And, it was tarted up, sound had been improved. This must have been the early 90s, I think about 92 or something. I've still got this box set somewhere. And I bought it and took it home. And the scene where Han Solo is running through the corridors of the Death Star being chased by stormtroopers, they go, close the blast door, close the blast door.
Close the blast door, close the blast door.
He jumps through, and the line where they go, open the blast door, had been taken out. It was just gone. It ruined the scene. God knows why. It was almost like an error, but how could they make an error like that? Anyway, I was so pissed off, I took it back to HMV and demanded my money back based on this line not being in it, and they repaid it.
Did you tell them that's the reason?
Yeah,
why
I did. I
you were
said
taking
it's because of the scene in the Death Star. It's just ruined the entire film. I bought it because I wanted it to be my definitive copy. By the way, talking of copies of this film, you mentioned the ones you have. Do you remember the first one you got?
First one we had, a version of that film was probably from, I'm trying to think when it would be. It would be mid-80s video shop.
Okay. We should explain. You're 35, aren't you?
So I'm 35. I was born in 1980. So I was born in the year that Empire was released.
Okay.
So I wasn't alive for the first Star Wars film. So I wasn't alive to see it at the cinema. So the first time let's just say the first 30 times I saw it, it was on a VHS tape. Because in those days, there was the years of lag from having things released onto tape.
Oh, God, a nightmare. And then in the really early days, it cost like 100 quid.
Yeah, it was
in 1980,
crazy.
which is like about $1,000 nowadays.
So we went to, there was a video shop near where we grew up, where I grew up. And you walked in there, and the first thing that hit you was the smell of this video shop.
Yeah.
It was a quality video shop. And I have this clear memory of being... I checked with my mum and dad. This is a couple of years ago, and we got talking about this particular video shop we used to go to, and they came to the conclusion that I must have been about 5.
Okay.
I would be a 5-year-old boy, and
So this is 1985.
This is 1985, and I was at the cinema. I was bored Saturday afternoon. They said, "We'll take you down the video shop." So we would go down the video shop, and the first thing that struck you about this place was the smell. You'd walk in. And it had the most unique smell that I can't possibly ever... I've never been able to replicate it in any way, but I remember it to this day.
Yeah.
And my dad tells me the reason it smelt so much is they had a major fire... Right. In the building where the video shop was.
Yes.
It was above a bookies.
Right.
And there was a major fire in the bookies, and it burnt all the way through and torched the video shop.
Okay.
But it wasn't a video shop then. But
Yes.
all they did was they walked into the room and they were shown it by, I think, they bought the place. And the walls are covered in black soot.
Right.
And it's burnt, it's fire damage everywhere.
Okay.
And all they did
Yes.
was paint over the fire damaged
Really?
walls.
Right, okay.
And put a new carpet on top of the fire damaged carpet that was there.
Right,
Because they
okay.
didn't want to spend the money to take it. It was the 80s. You could do what the hell you like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they whipped it, and it had a burnt smell.
But it was pleasant.
Oh God!
Yeah.
It's the most evocative smell. I
Right.
don't know. Yeah, I love a good house fire.
Right, yeah.
But
You
there's
just take a pot of paint and a new carpet round and start layering
delicious.
it on.
But I went in there and they said, come on, pick out a video. We'll see what it is. And I looked around. There was racks and racks of videos, most of it crap. And I couldn't for the life of me find anything. And then in the middle, VHS copy of Star Wars.
And it was Star because all 3 films were out by... Oh, excuse me.
Well, they were out by then. I mean,
Yes.
Jedi had been out. Well,
2
Jedi
years.
had been at the cinema for 2 years, but it probably wasn't on VHS till
yes,
about
of
88,
course.
89.
Yes.
You're talking years. People don't understand these days. As soon as before it's in the cinema, you can download it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks to the Far Eastern piracy.
Yeah.
You can tape these things.
So you hired this? You didn't buy
Hired it, sat down, watched it. And then I watched it. We had it for about a week. It was a week rental.
Yeah.
But that I don't know what kind of cut it was. It must have been the very basic early cut. He
yeah.
wasn't messing about with those.
Yeah.
And that was that's when I saw it. But you saw it at the cinema. But for me, it was
Yes.
from a burnt out, fire damaged video shop.
I'm 7 years older than you. I'm 42. So I was 5 in 1977, and went to see it. It just changed my life. And I pestered my mum and or dad to take me another 5 times, because this was in the days where films would come back to the cinema, after, say, 6 months or a year, it'd get a rerun at the cinema. So I think I probably saw it 2 or 3 times when I was young, on its initial release. And then, when it came back, watched it again. But the first copy I ever had of it, we didn't get a VCR for a while. Star Wars had actually been on TV before we had a video recorder.
I taped it off the TV as well.
Yeah, we bought a copy off someone else who taped it and didn't want it. And I had this copy of it for years and years. I've still got it, but I would never put it in a VCR. Not that I own a VCR. It would just be too old and mouldy. But the one thing about this copy was... actually, no, I'm getting slightly mixed up. We later on got a pirate copy. My parents paid out an absolute fortune to some shifty character they found who got us a version of Return of the Jedi. And what I always remember about that is someone had accidentally pressed the record button about halfway through the film, and there's about 2 minutes of the Tory party conference in the middle of it.
Joking, really?
No, I think it's John Selwyn Gummer talking about council houses. I can't quite remember when it crops in. And the other thing I remember about it was, the quality of this Return of the Jedi was appalling. I think there was a time code underneath as well, one of those weird... whatever it was that video editors use. And as soon as it ends, the music builds up to a crescendo. They're in the Ewok village.
Oh, yeah.
And then, bang, George Lucas credit. As soon as that had happened, whoever pirated this just pressed stop. So there was no end credits or anything.
So you didn't get the full effect of Numbnuts?
Well, I did, but, the quality was dreadful. And, the film just ended so abruptly. But that original copy of Star Wars that someone had videoed off the telly, the adverts on it were incredible. Stuff for Campbell's meat soup in a can, 7-Up, Lion Bar,
that
which
is one
was
of the
5p.
joys. Oh, that is
Shake
one of
and
the...
Vax on it.
Oh,
Shake and
wow,
Vax
the classic Shake and
Vax.
Vax.
Yeah.
But that is. If you're listening to this and you're in America or something, you might not know. You probably would have had Shake and Vac, but you put the Shake and Vac, you put the freshness.
I tell you, she was quite a cougar.
She was the first cougar.
Yeah. She was kind of dressed a bit like the Bucks Fizz girl.
Well, you can forget. Well, that's aged you. You can forget. I was just trying to think who was the queen of the cougars, really, I suppose. But held up these days, you get Samantha, the character from Sex and the City.
Oh yes,
which is utterly appalling.
Yes,
but people say it's the Shake and Vac lady.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're onto something there. I mean, British people are always a bit sexy, something behind closed doors, and a bit embarrassing, and all of that. And her in that domestic setting, really kicking her heels back and. The first thing I would say about reviewing Star Wars is it's almost impossible because you can't, which is a great thing to say for a review service, but Star Wars, unlike any other film, has changed everything so much. We live in a Star Wars universe because of the impact the film had culturally, the way it changed cinema, the way it changed our lives. So you almost can't step backward far enough to get the distance to sum it up as a work of art, as a film, because
there are still people who haven't seen it.
Yes, there are.
There's still people who haven't seen it. Yeah,
I hate how lazy. Why haven't people?
I don't know. I can't imagine life without it. I can't imagine my life without having seen Star Wars. I'm sat here now in a Haynes manual.
Exactly. Gardulla is wearing this fantastic T-shirt. It's a Haynes manual, but it's of the Millennium Falcon with loads of cutaway sections.
You don't know what a Haynes manual is, perhaps. A Haynes manual was a range of British books from the 60s up to the 80s.
I'll take your word for that.
60s up to the 80s. Where every car that was available to buy and drive on British roads, they had to release an entire kit. And this book would contain how to change every single part. And so they've done this for the Millennium Falcon. But I'm sat here, I can't imagine life without it. But there are people we know who are...
I know someone who's got a degree in film from the University of Warwick.
Who's never seen Star Wars.
Who's never seen Star Wars.
Well, you've got to go and ask for your goddamn money back, haven't you?
Well, what I find weird is there's no other film like Star Wars. It's just, in terms of being a blockbuster, in terms of people going mad about it, being obsessed about it, there's no other film like that that I haven't seen. There's nothing out there that everyone is talking about that I somehow haven't got around to watching. And if there was something like
Twilight.
that, yeah, it's not in the same league though. Surely, I mean, Twilight isn't a cult. I mean, Twilight's a cultural game changer, perhaps for stupid teenagers.
Cultural game changer as opposed to a cult.
I'm giving Twilight weight. I don't think Twilight comes into the conversation. But I've never seen it. I'll be honest with you. But what I would say is, if there was another film like Star Wars, different genre, different, whatever, but everyone was going mad about it. It had such a cultural impact that Star Wars had. If I hadn't seen it, I would go and see it. I would have to go. I couldn't go through life saying, I've never seen this film that the entire planet's raving about. So that's the position people who haven't seen Star Wars are in, and I don't understand that. I just think out of curiosity, you would think, well, I'll watch it once to see what people are talking about. It's in our language. People talk about the Force. People, it's just referenced everywhere. As we said, Jedi is a religion. It's weird that people haven't got the curiosity, or people have the complete lack of interest to, just not check it out. It's 2 hours long. Why not?
The other side of things is, of course, it's on the census. Yes, well, and people put down, I'm a Jedi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did.
Lol.
Yeah.
But did you?
Yes.
Did you hear there was it was recently Bolsover. Did you read the news about Bolsover?
Bolsover, area
is a small town in North Nottinghamshire, right? Near another place called Mansfield, which is the true garden of England.
Yes.
But Bolsover, according to the 2000 or the census figures released 2011, it had a bunch of Jedis living in it, but it also had about 30 Satanists. So Bolsover is a hotbed of demonic worship. Apparently so, but people put all sorts of stuff down there. But the point I'm making is, it's hard for us to believe people who don't know what a Jedi is, what a Jedi is supposed to stand for. You have Alec Guinness, we've just spent 2 hours watching him,
fawning over him, brilliant. Performance.
What a great performance! He didn't have a damn clue what he was saying.
No.
It didn't matter. He got percentage points, but he created. Not a film character, a cultural icon. And he created those characters. However, there are people in the census who know what a Jedi is, are probably Star Wars fans, and probably know more about Jedi as a, quote, religion than would know about Sikhism.
Yes.
Or Hinduism.
I would probably count myself among them.
Yeah, you would say, tell us about the Guru Granth Sahib.
Yes.
And people might not want to, they might not know how to do it. But so it kind of works both ways. But there's no excuse for not having seen it.
I mean, as we both will say throughout this review, it's changed the world more than any other film, surely. And yet people haven't seen it.
It's changed film.
It's changed the world. It's changed the way we talk. It's changed the way we... I would go further. I mean, it's changed the way business is conducted. It's changed the way good and evil are sort of perceived. I don't think I'm over-egging it. I think because our generation are now the managers of the world.
The middle managers of the world.
I mean, people will, conduct their businesses, conduct their politics, conduct their relationships based on the formative lessons of these films when they were little kids, and it was, burned into them. I absolutely have no doubt or shame in saying I would be a completely different person without Star Wars. It sort of taught me, perhaps not right and wrong, but it's taught me so many lessons. I just feel, it almost gives me a kind of strength, Star Wars. It's something to fall back on. Yeah, not in terms of how I conduct myself per se, but just because it's always there as something I really like. I can think about it. I can spend a bit of time in that universe in some form.
Right.
I don't know, I'm probably not summing it up that well, but there is no other film that's changed the world more than Star Wars. And it's not just... It has changed cinema, but it's changed a lot more.
My shared experience through Star Wars is the same shared experience, I think, that it validates a lot of things. It gives you a community to fit into, in the same way that for some people football does.
Yes,
For
absolutely.
me, it's my football. Star Wars is
Yeah.
my football. I don't follow football. I couldn't care less.
Same here.
You know, I don't see how anything, you know, television rights for a football match is worth $5 billion
Yes,
for 3 years.
indeed, yes.
I don't understand it. You know,
Yeah, that's
10 million a
worth
match.
more than what Star Wars was sold for. Actually, the Premier
That was
League
sold for
football
4,
was.
wasn't it?
Yeah, and football was 5, I think.
Yeah, 5 for 3 years.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
like Disney have to hand Star Wars back in 3 years to George
Absolutely,
Lucas.
absolutely, yeah.
So, but that's, you know, that's it. But it's, so, the film that we watched, we mentioned Alec Guinness.
Yes,
You know, great performance.
I think
It stands up. It stands the test.
I think there's a strong argument for saying it's him who actually makes the film what it is, because the one thing Star Wars, the original films, did very well was hark back to its own mythology.
Yes.
You know, he talks about the old days, the wars, his friend who was betrayed and murdered. And you just think, God, that sounds so... Because he did it so well, it sounds so cool, and it makes you want to know more. Obviously, when you actually see the prequels, and it's the most crushing disappointment because they're terrible, terrible films, the prequels don't have any of that mythology, apart from the one scene when Palpatine talks to Anakin about Darth Plagueis. Or
Plagueis.
Plagueis, yeah.
Plagueis, like
And-
Darth Baddie.
And that is actually one of the better scenes, because
It's the best scene in the whole trilogy.
Yeah, because it's talking about something that you don't see. It's talking about the past, and that creates the mythology. So, coming back to Alec Guinness in this film, when he talks, he looks off into the distance, stroking his beard. You know, when I was a young man, it just sounds... That's what sets it up, I think. That gives it its... Not gravitas, it gives it its soul, in a way. It's hard to explain, but his performance is so important to the overall franchise.
Yeah.
All 6 films, I think, have a lot to do with how well he acted those scenes.
So, I mean, that's true. And the other performances in there, yes, Luke is very whiny, and I'd forgotten just how whiny he is.
I didn't think he was that whiny.
He's like a petulant teenager, but I suppose that's what he is.
Yeah.
Before the reality of things starts hitting him, on his little, moisture farm on the desert planet of Tatooine, he is a petulant teenager.
But he's nothing like Hayden Christensen's whiny Anakin Skywalker, who just whines
I
through.
think we could watch anything in the original trilogy, couldn't we, and say, well, at least it's not as bad
Yes, fair,
as
fair.
and that kind of
Yeah.
it renders those
I
unwatchable.
I don't find Luke Skywalker whiny, personally.
No?
I just thought he was young. I don't find him a negative presence or an annoying
I don't find
presence.
him a negative presence, but he does have that kind of I wanted to do that kind
Yeah, but
of feel to him.
It's just like when he's a teenager at home. When it begins, he wants to leave, doesn't he, and go off to the academy.
The academy.
Yes, we were
Yeah.
sort of wondering.
Fame Academy. That's
Yes,
where he wants to go to.
indeed. Could have been an agricultural college or something like that. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. But
Ask Brian.
yeah, but that is right at the beginning of his story, isn't it? Where as soon as he's plunged into the big events, he's not whiny then, is he? He's completely...
No, he turns. Well, he's been
Yeah.
he's been smartened up to the Force, hasn't he?
Yes.
And he's got that very basic understanding of what the Force actually is. And it's he by the end of the film, Luke has experienced more. It's a huge education in the Force, isn't it?
Yes,
the Force helped him blow up the Death Star.
Yes.
And it protected him from Darth Vader's cannons to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I like about The Force is when films normally do magic in films, it just doesn't work because magic has no limits. You can sort of, you can't see magic. It just doesn't work. I don't think vampires work. You're talking about Twilight, supernatural stuff, magic.
Yeah.
For me, it doesn't work in film. The Force is magic. And it does work. And I think the way they do it is, A, they don't abuse it. They don't use the Force to get out of every situation.
Yeah.
But B, it's all kept wonderfully vague. It's never explained. It's more of a feel. They actually say, in the prequels, I think, feel, don't think. But that is kind of what the Force is as a concept in this film. It's the only film I've ever watched where, magic hasn't felt a bit naff and out of place.
No, very true, very true. Other performances in there. Carrie Fisher's amazing movable accent.
Yes,
which is good.
Yeah, she's brilliant. We were saying earlier, the older you get, the more you fancy Carrie Fisher. When you're a kid and you're watching Star Wars, I don't know if it's because I was just too young to be interested in girls at that point, but she was always virginal.
Yeah.
Virginal. That's the word.
Was virgin on the offensive.
Yeah, but she wasn't. She's not a strumpet sex. You know, like
no. She was always. She's soberly dressed in a white smock.
Yes.
The whole thing. I mean, it's a very unsexy outfit that she has. It's not until you get to Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
And you know that bikini.
Oh, that I thought you meant the command smock she wore when she was on the Rebel command ship. Man, that
you liked her as like a female Boba Fett, didn't you? That's what you liked.
Oh yes, Boosh the bounty hunter.
Boosh the bounty hunter.
Yeah,
but,
I mean,
but she's. I tell you what, the HD really showed to me is you can see, and you see it on 2 stars all the way through. Luke, you don't see it on him. Alec Guinness, you don't see it on him. You see maybe a touch more sort of gaunt makeup on Peter Cushing's face.
Yes, we noticed that, didn't we? Underneath
Red
his
tinged.
eyes. Yeah.
Underneath his red bags underneath his eyes.
Yes.
But also, by that point, Peter Cushing was not a young man. So
No.
he was by no means elderly and decrepit, but he wasn't a young man. He was aging.
I think that the red under his eyes struck me. I was surprised by how much that jumps out. So I could only conclude it was there for a reason.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He was just knackered. That's what they're showing. He's just knackered. He's had a tough life running that Death Star. He's been building it for 17 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
He finally build it, and the Rebel Alliance blow the bloody thing up. The other, I tell you what shows up because it is a 70s film.
Yes.
Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher's makeup.
Yes.
Is intensely 70s to me. It's Carrie Fisher has, amazing, beautiful lip gloss.
Yes, which didn't really show up in,
No, it didn't show up in standard
definition.
HD, but you see it in HD. She has, Farrah Fawcett style lip gloss. She's got beautiful eye makeup.
Yes,
you actually see most people. Actors and actresses. I mean, you hear this about them when things go into HD, especially when television channels go into HD.
Yes.
That actors and actresses don't like HD because it shows up all the crevices and cracks and everything like that.
Yep.
Carrie Fisher looks more beautiful in HD than she. I mean, she was beautiful in SD. She looks incredible in HD.
Did you notice how a lot of them look more tanned?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought Harrison Ford was as brown as a berry.
He had a very nice Californian tan.
Yeah, and Alec Guinness was very brown as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was still blacked up from a passage to India or whatever it was.
But, you look at it and you think, well, maybe he kept some of the makeup. It was filmed out well.
Yeah.
But, Alec Guinness there, maybe he had a few extra days in Tunisia when they were filming the thing. Just had a bit of a sun tan.
Well, what I would say about, if we're going to assess the performances, I mean, it obviously comes with that trio, doesn't it? Han, Luke and Leia, and then the wonderful contributions of, all the other ones like Peter Cushing, etc. I'm told, and I've read this, that they casted an alternative trio to play those parts, but they tested them all together and said, if we're going to have Harrison Ford, then we've got to have Hamill and Fisher, because those 3 work together. But if we don't want Harrison Ford or one of them, we'll go with the other trio, because they work together. There was never any opportunity to mix and match. You couldn't have had, say, Fisher and Ford, and then someone else playing Luke. It would have been 3 other actors. They, took forever to cast the film. They wanted to get that camaraderie, that crackling electricity between them, and they absolutely pulled it off. They're brilliant as a trio.
Talk about best supporting actors in Star Wars. The version we've just seen, the George Lucas, titivated Super HD version.
Yes.
Best supporting actor, in my opinion.
Yes.
Peter Mayhew's eyes.
Yes.
Chewbacca's eyes in this in the background of all scenes that he's in.
Yeah.
His eyes never look anywhere twice. They're constantly moving.
Yeah.
Left, to everybody's faces, or he's constantly looking at what they're pointing at, or what they're doing. Just any scene that he's in, you have to watch his eyes. It's the most incredible thing.
It's true. It was such a masterwork to use the real actor's eyes, because
Yeah.
so many of those costumes they don't, and immediately the life goes out of the performance.
Yeah.
But absolutely,
soul to it.
Yeah.
It brings a soul to Chewbacca's face.
Yeah, yeah.
And the mouth looks a bit hokey these days, is what you'd say.
Yes.
The mouth is not one of those practical effects that's aged very well. I never actually thought it looked fantastic anyway. It doesn't matter because there's so much soul in his facial performance underneath all of that. And all he really has to do is sort of stride around the place and howl. And you see all sorts of other little details and tricks when they're in the trash compactor.
Yes.
And it's slowly squeezing. What I'd never noticed before was that when Chewbacca is trying to push the thing back, he manages to stop it and push it back.
Really?
Yeah. He manages to stop and push it back. There's the
Is that because the props blokes on the other side is just no match for
match for Pete Mayhew?
Yeah.
The other side of that coin is you get the stormtrooper hitting his head on the way through the door into the control room, and boom, you get a really prominent sound on that one.
Yes, I enjoyed that.
I thought it brought characters to life in a way that I don't remember them living.
Yes.
Before having seen it in HD, it's a messy way of saying it, but you get what I mean.
I do. I mean,
add extra layers to it.
What we're actually seeing here, on our screen at home, is what people saw in the pictures. It's that is it. You all those little details were blown up huge on a great big screen. Now we can enjoy the film as it was supposed to be, intended. But just getting onto the film itself, why is it so good?
It tells. Well, you look at it; it's so difficult to think of it as a standalone film now, isn't it?
Yes.
But if you were to forget prequel trilogy, Empire, and Return of the Jedi, forget that any of those exist.
Yeah.
To this day, people would look at that and say it was a
absolutely,
masterpiece.
Absolutely. They might look at it a bit more favourably.
Yeah. Because it's not a legend that soiled itself.
Yeah.
It stands alone as a complete film.
Why is it so good? What would you say?
I think it takes you along. You care about the characters. When we were watching this, the one thing that you made the point of is in the climactic battle over the Death Star. Even though most of the fighters of the X and the Y wings. You've only just met
the pilots.
You care when they die.
Yes.
You feel that it's bad when they die.
Yeah. Whereas in the prequels, when people die, you just so what?
So what? It's a sea of CGI.
Yeah.
Some films are very good at CGI, and you care about. I tell you what, for a sea of CGI that you care about the result. The latest Planet of the Apes films.
Yes.
Beautifully done CGI that can tell a story.
Yeah.
Just an army full of droids in the prequel Star Wars you don't care about. Even when the Jedi in Attack of the Clones, to show you how bad the prequels are, the climactic battle of Attack of the Clones, where it is Jedi's fighting for their lives and Jedi's are getting cut down. These are the ultimate good guys. I couldn't care less.
And, that comes back to what I was saying earlier about Alec Guinness, harking back to the Clone Wars. There's all that resonance, all that pent-up anticipation among Star Wars films to actually see that.
Yeah. And when they showed it, it was rubbish.
Absolutely. I mean, there's one good shot in it where they're in a circle, and they use that in the trailer. And the actual stuff is... we've both said this. The CGI that, is injected into this film, that was complete with all the subtlety of a brick, and all the CGI in the prequels, it just looks like Babylon 5. It's aged so badly.
It looks like Babylon 5.
Yeah, but I think getting back to why this film is good, you have to start with the characters. I mean, the plot of Star Wars, it's a great plot. It gets them from A to B to C. It's got tension, ups, downs.
We've got to rescue the princess. Oh, we've rescued the princess. Now we've got to rescue ourselves. Oh no, Obi-Wan. We've got to get away. Yeah, it's not Hitchcock, and it would be a crap film if it was Hitchcock. It's the script is perfect, but the reason ultimately I think we care about this film and we think it's great is because we love the characters. They're brilliant. Han Solo is the coolest character in cinema,
Absolutely,
without a doubt. I mean, he does a lot with not a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, but you genuinely believe this guy, especially after the, we'll forget the who shot first.
Yes, yes, we had
but even
to
after the
endure
chat with
that,
Greedo and the appalling scene where he meets Jabba in the hangar.
Yes.
By that point, you already love him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know if that's down to the performance. It's a mix, isn't it? It's a mix of Harrison Ford and the words he's saying.
Yes.
You know, I suppose you could say that about any acting role, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
It's a mix of the actor and the words they're saying, but it's a perfect mix.
Yeah.
It could not have been anybody else.
Absolutely.
And it pulls you in. And you care about Luke, and you care about Leia.
Yeah.
You care what happens to the droids, you know, which is why even to this day, when R2-D2 gets shot,
yes, I feel emotion.
feel that.
Yeah, I really
You know.
do. Because as soon as he blows up, it cuts back to the control room where the rebels are, and
C-3PO
3PO just looks to one side and then looks back, and he just looks bereft.
Yeah.
He's not even in. I don't think
he's not even got a face. He's got no eyes.
Exactly. I'm not even sure he's in total focus. I think he's in the background slightly. It's just a little touch like that. It humanises it so much.
It's good because it's a masterpiece of pace, of timing, of drama, of things building and concluding. It just has one of the greatest scores. All the way through.
The greatest. No argument for me.
That absolutely, in the right way, gives you the cues. We've had this private conversation before, where a lot of the times it's the same people making it, and yet on one film it works really well, on the other film it doesn't. I'll refer you, musical clue wise, cue wise. John Williams' work through Star Wars is absolutely incredible, and it aids every scene. Shades of Battle of Britain, victory marches in the final, in the room where the presentation happens.
I was struck by how similar that part of the score was to the Battle of Britain theme.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. Compare that with lazy musical clues in Attack of the Clones, which is everybody accepts is the pit of the Star Wars 6 films.
Yes, it's the worst, yes.
The Padme musical clue.
Yes.
It's used all the time in lieu of acting, drama, pacing, or talent.
They're trying to use that as a way of giving the scene an end or a meaning. Or,
Oh, they're in love. Oh, they're in love. What a load of shit.
I mean, what I find amazing about this is, we talk about this film, it's getting on for 40 years old, which is terrifying.
Yeah, a couple more years, it'd be 40.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't have to imagine, I was there at the time, but just imagine the world in general when it came out. There was nothing like that, and then this film comes out. Does everyone love it at the time just because it's something new and it's a breakthrough, it's a different way of doing a blockbuster film? Yes, they do. But 40 years on, people are still loving it. It's not like It's not like the novelty of it is the reason it's made such an impact. It is still a great film. It still holds up.
That film is the reason why you can go on YouTube now and watch people crying when they see the new trailers for the Star Wars films.
Yes, absolutely.
And you see the power. And the impact it had. And these are people of all walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different ages.
Completely,
You see dads watching it with little kids and yelping when the Millennium Falcon appears. You see women, and you see men and women, crying with excitement as it starts to come in.
Funny you should mention The Force Awakens. Obviously, we're hugely looking forwards to December when that comes out.
Massively.
Watching this kind of framed it a bit for me, what my expectations are for it. Because on the one hand, you want to be 5 again. You want it to have the same impact of the film we've just seen. Let's be realistic. That isn't going to happen. And if you really want that, you're going to come out disappointed. So I've secretly wanted that. I want that same thing. But having seen this, I accept that the world's changed, cinema's changed, I've changed. Nearly 40 years have gone by. If I walk out of seeing The Force Awakens this December, and I can say there was maybe 2-3 moments in that new film that took me back to how I felt watching this one, I'll be satisfied with that. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to ask for.
Do you know what? I think J.J. Abrams has an easier job than George Lucas had with the prequels.
because we have such a low base of expectations.
Not because of the low base of expectations.
Right.
He has, I believe, an easier job because the teaser. All we have is a teaser trailer, which is 1 minute and 20 of assorted early finished shots. Right?
It's 1 minute 18.
1 minute
seconds.
18.
Yes, I think.
He had toys to play with. He's got toys to play with that George Lucas didn't have in the prequels.
Yeah.
He can show you the Millennium Falcon and make you cry.
Yes.
Because you are so emotionally invested in that ship.
Yes, yes.
All he has to do, and all he did, was show it to you, flying through the air and taking on 2 TIE fighters that sounded like TIE fighters.
Yes, yes.
And he's got you, hasn't he?
Whereas in the prequel...
You're going to feel like that when you walk out, because you're going to see the Millennium Falcon fly around, being flown around by Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher.
Yes, indeed. The elderly Han Solo and Princess Leia.
With his broken foot.
Yes.
You're going to see that. He's got it. I swear to God,
but
he's got it easy.
I know what you're saying. There's a connection between this new film coming out, Episode 7, and 4, 5, and 6, which wasn't there for the prequels. That's why you have yellow Naboo starfighters instead of X-Wing fighters, which are shit. But it's a double-edged sword you're talking about here, because if that film is Episode 7 is shit, that is going to hurt more than the prequels being shit, because you care about these characters, you care about the Millennium Falcon more than you would about Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman. Albeit, one of them was Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of the most cherished characters in the franchise. It's a double-edged thing. Sure, you're going to like it more. Yeah. You're going to be more invested in it. But if it's crap, I don't think it will be crap. But what I'm worried about is, will it feel like Star Wars? Yeah. That's what I'm worried about.
I think as soon as that music starts, you'll be in.
Yeah, I think
you'll be in. He's got you.
Yeah,
But it's the John Williams score, isn't it? Yeah, it's not. But it's unlike any other film. John Williams can't use that same tune on every film he does. He's had to come up with a whole list of brilliant.
Oh, amazing! Jaws and E.T. The list goes on.
Some amazing pieces of work, but when it goes. And you see, that's what J.J. Abrams did really well as well, because he gave you that. And the Millennium Falcon, and 2 TIE fighters,
yes,
and
an X-wing,
and an X-wing, and he showed it to you.
It was a very shit robot he showed. There wasn't a very shit droid.
I don't know. I quite like it. There's got to be something for the kiddies.
Yeah,
got to be something for the kiddies. Yeah, and that's definitely for the kiddies. You never know. It might be charming. It might be charming. It might be.
Yeah, it could be good.
Unlike any whole raft of annoying robots in cinema.
Yeah,
it might be a charming robot. It might have there's shades of a kind of a Wall-E type thing about it.
Yeah, I think it's got shades of Dyson's vacuum cleaners, because
they looks like a football with a head.
Yeah. They tried to bring out a vacuum cleaner that's like a football ball that it will go around any corner. I think they've extended that to droid technology.
It'll be that R2D2. C-3PO on every lunchbox.
Yeah, absolutely.
2016.
Yeah. Well, look, let's sum this up now, because we've been.
Marks out of 10.
It's got to be 10.
It has to be 10. I'm saying 10.
Yeah, I mean, what in it? I mean, forget the the additions, the crap CGI. Just leave them to one side. The film itself, what can you point to and say, I wish that had been better? That's less than perfect. That could have been. I can't think of anything. There is nothing in Star Wars where I think, I wish they'd done it that way. I wish they'd, had.
I couldn't change anything.
No, there's not, and it's not out of, a sort of slavish loyalty, that fanboys have. It's literally the case of it is perfect.
I'm worried about. The thing is, Star Wars is such a big thing for me. Which would be interesting when we review other films, because we won't have that connection to them, so we'll probably tear them to pieces. But it's. There are some people who obviously watch Star Wars who hate it, and there are some people who just say they hate it to cause YouTube arguments.
Yeah.
But the thing is, watching that, I'd be worried of like a sort of a reverse butterfly effect.
Oh, yes,
so if I was to say, I didn't like Darth Vader's voice.
Yes.
It might mean that I lose my virginity at a different age at some point in my timeline, or it's
It's true.
I'd be worried it would change it. It would change the person I am now to change anything in that film
Completely. I mean, I don't know what toys I would have played with when I was a kid for a start.
Exactly. I might have actually gone outside, got into football,
Yeah,
as opposed to stay inside and played with toys.
You might be a Premier League footballer now, earning $100,000 a week because of
God
Star
damn you,
Wars.
George Lucas. So all that, it's 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 for me, without a doubt.
Okay.
I cannot fault it.
There it is. So Star Wars, Episode 1. Or not
Episode
Episode 1,
4.
Episode 4. A New Hope, Super HD Blu-ray version.
Yeah.
First film we reviewed. Here on a bunch of cults. If you fancy or recommending a film or something you'd like to watch, feel free to comment below. Something you think we might like to see. It's largely, if it classes as a cult, it classes as eligible to talk to.
And what is a cult? I'm sure that's something we'll be discussing in itself as this series progresses.
Exactly. So go down, leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.